Explain. The phrase, never look a gift horse in the mouth. People can judge the age, quality of a horse by looking at its mouth. If you were going to buy a horse, you would want to check there to make sure the horse has the qualities you think you're paying for. The idea is that if someone is giving you a horse for free, it shouldn't really matter what qualities that horse has, assuming you are interested in owning a horse at all. Trying to assess its value, particularly right in front of the giver, is kind of like getting a gift and asking, how much did this cost? It can come across as rude or ungrateful. Edit, it sounds like, whether you're an equestrian or a Trojan, the correct advice should really be to always look literal horses of any price in the mouth. That way you know what you're getting into, what's getting into you. You know, it occurs to me that I've never thought about the origin of that saying. Crazy how many things come from days when stuff that was common back then, but very rare now. Don't let the cat out of the bag, and the less common, never buy a pig in a poke, are based on a scam from back in the days of yore. Supposedly people would put a stray cat in a sack, aka a poke, and claim it was a baby pig, and sell it to an unsuspecting dupe. I bet you the people looking gifted horses in the mouth didn't get duped by that pig in a poke bullshit. Can tell the health of a horse by its teeth. Someone gives you a gift horse, don't nitpick it. Even if it's not the greatest horse, it's a free horse. In particular, its age. Explain like I'm 5. What is the UN and why do we need it? I don't understand what is point of the UN, what role they have in the world. Let's say the Security Council decides something on some country, how they enforce it, who can enforce it, and who really cares. The problem people have in understanding the UN is that they think it is supposed to function like a world government. It doesn't, and it was never intended to. The UN was established after WW2 to prevent another world war between the great powers. It is a forum for discussion. It was understood in its design that it could never actually bind the great powers, and it makes no attempt to do so. They're explicitly given vetoes. It doesn't function like a government, but it does function like a government agency. WHO, UNESCO, etc. all do vital and important work combating disease and poverty and the like. The UN is a forum for governments to talk in to prevent war, but it's also a way to combat the systemic inadequacies that drive war, and to protect human rights. I mean, it functions like a government, in the way that a BB gun functions like a real firearm. It looks like one can serve some of the same functions as one, but lacks the core component and purpose of the real thing. The UN can be considered a place, basically the only place, where the countries of the world come together to collectively solve the biggest problems with words and plans instead of guns and bombs. Yes, in times of conflict, it works mostly through persuasion rather than through edicts. This is known as soft power, and it is hard to measure its efficacy compared to hard power. One argument that it does have an effect is that people do not ignore the UN. They go there and make their cases to try and persuade the world that they are correct. If it was irrelevant, they wouldn't need to bother. Their delegate could just stay home and say nothing. Is it always enough to prevent war? No. Is it sometimes so, perhaps? How do you list the wars that didn't happen? But it is also important to remember that the UN does not just act during war. It is the home for UNICEF, UNHCR, WFP, UNDP, UNEP, UNFPA, UN Habitat, and many, many other organizations that reduce the suffering of millions or billions of people around the world. How many additional people are tending farms instead of picking up guns right now? Here's an incredible story about how the UN is rolling back the Sahara Desert. There are 35.3 million refugees in the world, and UNHCR is responsible for trying to get them to safety. Millions of them are directly housed in camps run by UNHCR. And that's just one of the dozens of agencies run by the UN. There are 11 UN peacekeeping operations right now. Once again, we'll never know how many wars they prevented, because they didn't happen. Another big job of the UN is to give people a place to standardize regulations and agree on treaties. A whole lot of the modern world works because there are UN agencies and treaties that help standardize things like postage and telecom regulations. Also, it's important people keep in mind the peacekeepers genuinely have a pretty good success rate. A whole lot of the places they show up successfully transition to a peaceful state. Their failures are just infinitely more discussed because they lead to bloodshed. The biggest benefit to the existence of the UN is that it's a place where countries can just talk. It may not seem a lot, but an exchange of words always go a long way, and the UN provides a place where that could occur, even when guns are already drawn. As for who can enforce what the UN decides, that's something countries do that themselves, voluntarily. It may seem improbable or even insane, but countries generally want to be in good terms with each other. So when they enter an agreement, they generally adhere to the provisions of that agreement, unless they want nobody to ever enter into an agreement with them. Ever. You don't want to be known as the untrustworthy guy, unless of course you're too delusional or up your own ass that you can't see just how important the rest of the world is to your own country. Explain like I'm five. How did people like Isaac Newton, Kant, Michelangelo, Beethoven, all the greats, find the time? The output of historic geniuses is just insane. The sheer amount of work and discovery and creation they did seems too much for one lifetime. I just don't understand how they managed all they did. The scientists were bored noblemen, rich, so they had nothing but time. The artists? Art was literally their job. You might as well ask an accountant where they get all of the time to calculate numbers. Correction. The scientists were either noblemen or clergy. A lot of the great scientists were monks and priests or physicians. As others have said, they were either rich people who could do whatever they wanted with their time, Newton, Dante, Darwin, or it was literally their job, Leonardo, Shakespeare. Very few non-rich people created amazing art as a side gig or an activity not meant to generate revenue. Pessoa comes to mind. Maids, nannies, cooks, and wives did all the household chores for them. Most of them were either wealthy men of leisure or sponsored by a patron. No TV, no phones, books were hard to come by. They could dedicate 24/7 to their work. Imagine you had a year out in the countryside with no electricity, plus a full staff to see to your every need. 3 times a day, delicious food would be brought to you, and you would even have a valet to dress you in the morning. How much time could you spend on your passions? How much time could you spend on your passions? You've got 16 hours of free time per day for an entire year. Do you masturbate? Invent calculus. Explain like I'm five. What is it in milk that stops your mouth burning from spicy foods? Drinking milk after eating chili or curry, etc., makes your mouth hurt less. But why? And are there any dairy-free alternatives that do the same? In addition to the casein, milk contains fats. Capsaicin is lipophilic, meaning it likes to mix with fats. Milk is a relatively watery substance that allows the capsaicin to bind to the casein and be washed away by the fats, making it an all-around spice killer. To expand on this, oils will help also. One time I got pepper juice on my balls, and I had to wipe them down with a paper towel soaked in vegetable oil. Edit, to answer everyone's questions, of course oils are fats, which is why it worked. How did I get it on my balls? Well, I was cooking naked and adjusted my junk after chopping some peppers. It could have happened to anyone. This wasn't even that bad, as the peppers were relatively mild. Don't even ask about the other time with the bird's eye chilies. You got what on where? Don't act like you're so smart you never got pepper juice on your balls. Capsaicin is the active ingredient in chilies that create the spicy sensation on your tongue. It doesn't easily mix with water, so it's very hard to wash off. Milk contains another chemical called casein that binds with capsaicin and helps wash it off your tongue. For a non-dairy alternative, you can try crunchy peanut butter. The texture can help distract the nerves that are feeling the burning sensation, and the oils can dissolve and wash away the capsaicin. Unfun fact: if you get mugged with pepper spray and having your husband waterboarded you with milk doesn't do enough for your burning eyes, some diluted antacid will do the trick, just as it does for heartburn. I speak from experience. Explain like I'm five. Lifting more weight without building more muscle. Bit of a weird question. How is it that people gain strength without getting relatively bigger or more muscle? Imagine I can bench 100 kilograms or 225 pounds for a 1-rep max. Now imagine I train hard and now can lift the same weight for 3 reps. It's unlikely your muscles have gotten 3 times bigger. What has actually changed in the body to enable this? When you lift heavier weights, your body adapts in various ways beyond just building bigger muscles. Your nervous system becomes more efficient at coordinating muscle contractions, your tendons and ligaments get stronger, and you improve your technique. So, even though your muscles might not significantly increase in size, these other adaptations allow you to lift heavier weights without necessarily getting much bigger. PT here, this is correct. Most of the strength gains made in the first several weeks of a new strengthening routine are primarily through neuromuscular adaptations, rather than an increase in muscle fiber diameter or number. This is why early strength gains are made relatively quickly, and changes in body composition are not noticed until a few months of persistent activity. Don't mind me asking a question, but what is the difference for your muscles between increasing weight or increasing the number of reps, but keeping the same weight? The body operates on the SAID principle, which stands for Specific Adaptation to Imposed Demands. Basically, if you just squat super heavy weight, your body will adapt its physiology and anatomy to lift heavy things better. This may mean making larger quad and glute muscle fibers, or increasing the ratio of type 2 to type 1 muscle fibers, amongst other things. Whereas, if you instead run 5 miles every day, your body will adapt to get better at running long distances. This could mean increasing the amount of capillaries in the leg muscle, increasing the amount of type 1 muscle fibers, or improving the lungs' ability to exchange gases. The body reacts to the load you put on it, so higher reps and lower weight will improve your ability to perform prolonged work and lifting. Higher weight at low reps will improve your ability to perform higher force contractions in a brief period. Lifting requires groups of muscles working together, never a single one. At the beginning, they aren't used to working together, so you actually lift well below your real capacity. Never a single one. Bruh, you don't isolate palmaris longus muscle for ropey wrist gains? Moving from 1 rep at a given weight to 3 reps at a given weight is not tripling your strength. That's a pretty minor increase in strength. The actual weight is much more significant. Going from, say, a 75-pound bench to a 225-pound bench is more like tripling your strength. It is literally 3x the weight, but strength as a concept is a little more nuanced. And you would find that you did indeed build substantially more muscle doing that. Well, that's another episode of Explain Like I'm 5 in the books. I really appreciate all of you who made it this far into the video. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, it would really help the channel out a lot if you gave the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.